Kayla Ironfang was known across the mountain frontier as the richest orc woman anyone had ever seen. Her ranch stretched across rolling green valleys, her silver mines sparkled beneath the cliffs, and hundreds of horses grazed behind sturdy wooden fences. Merchants traveled for days just to earn her business, while workers respected her for paying fair wages. Yet despite her wealth, Kayla returned each evening to a grand stone house that echoed with silence. Years earlier she had lost the man she loved to illness, and since then she had buried her grief beneath endless work. To outsiders she seemed proud and unbreakable, but behind closed doors she often wondered whether success had cost her the chance to have a real family. Only a few miles away, hidden among tall pines beside a gentle river, lived Tahoma, a widowed Apache father. His cabin was small, built with his own hands from pine logs and river stones. He had no servants, no silver, and no large herds of cattle. Everything he owned had been earned through honest labor, hunting, fishing, and tending a modest vegetable garden. Since his wife's passing 4 years earlier, every part of his life centered on his 8-year-old daughter, Ayana. Ayana was bright, kind, and endlessly curious. She loved gathering wildflowers, feeding woodland birds, and listening to her father's stories beside the evening fire. Though they possessed little, she never complained. Tahoma often reminded her that a rich heart mattered more than a heavy purse, and she believed him completely. One autumn afternoon, dark clouds rolled over the mountains without warning. A fierce storm swept across the valley, sending rain crashing against rooftops and turning the dirt roads into rivers of mud. Kayla was riding across her ranch, checking on her workers, when disaster struck. One of the ranch hands attempted to secure frightened horses near a rocky hillside. The soaked earth suddenly gave way, and a heavy wagon slid downhill, trapping the man beneath its broken wheel. Workers shouted in panic, but the storm was too dangerous. No one dared approach the unstable slope. Tahoma happened to be returning from a hunting trip nearby. Hearing desperate cries carried by the wind, he tied his horse beneath a tree and raced toward the accident without stopping to ask who needed help. Ignoring the pouring rain and falling rocks, he wedged a thick timber beneath the wagon and strained with all his strength. Muscles trembling, boots sinking into the mud, he managed to lift the wheel just high enough for others to pull the injured worker free before the wagon crashed completely. Kayla watched the rescue in stunned silence. She had seen strong warriors before, but few who risked their own lives for a stranger without expecting payment or praise. After the storm passed, she thanked Tahoma personally and offered him a pouch filled with silver coins. Tahoma smiled politely and shook his head. "I helped because someone needed saving," he said. "Kindness loses its meaning when it comes with a price." Those simple words stayed with Kayla for weeks. She found herself thinking less about profits and more about the quiet Apache father whose greatest treasure seemed to be his daughter and his honor. Soon, whispers spread across the frontier that the wealthy orc had been visiting the little cabin by the river. Then, during the annual harvest gathering, with merchants, ranchers, and tribal families all watching, Kayla did something no one expected. She stepped before Tahoma and calmly asked, "Would you consider becoming my husband?" Gasps swept through the crowd. Tahoma stood frozen, searching for the right words. Before he could answer, little Ayana gently took her father's hand, looked directly into Kayla's eyes, and quietly said, "Before my father answers, may I ask you one question?" The entire gathering fell silent, and even Kayla found herself unable to speak. The silence that followed Ayana's question seemed to stretch across the entire harvest festival. Merchants stopped bargaining. Children paused their games. Even the horses standing near the market square became strangely still, as if they sensed something important was about to happen. Kayla, a woman who had negotiated with powerful traders and stubborn landowners without ever showing fear, found herself unexpectedly nervous before an 8-year-old girl. She lowered herself onto one knee so her eyes were level with Ayana's. "You may ask anything," Kayla said gently. Ayana looked at her father first. Tahoma gave a small nod, trusting his daughter to speak from her heart. The little girl turned back to Kayla. "My father says that people can become poor and rich many times in life, she began softly. But if someone loses kindness, they become poorer than anyone. The crowd listened without making a sound. You have a beautiful ranch, Ayana continued. Everyone says you're the richest woman in these mountains. But I don't know if you're rich where it matters. Kayla blinked in surprise. What do you mean? She asked. Ayana clasped her small hands together. If you marry my father, will you love him when he has nothing to give you? If your silver mines disappeared tomorrow, would you still smile at him? And, would you ever ask him to stop being the man he already is? Those simple questions struck Kayla harder than any insult ever could. No merchant had ever questioned her heart. No rival had ever challenged her character. But this little girl wasn't trying to embarrass her. She was trying to protect the only parent she had left. Tahoma watched quietly, proud of his daughter's courage but ready to stop her if she became uncomfortable. Instead, Ayana stepped one pace closer. I don't need another rich person, she whispered. I miss my mother every day. If you become part of our family, I don't want a lady who buys me gifts. I want someone who sits beside me when I'm afraid. Someone who laughs with us around the fire. Someone who loves my father even when nobody is watching. Several people in the crowd lowered their heads, deeply moved. Kayla felt her throat tighten. For years she had believed wealth could solve almost every problem. Whenever someone struggled, she offered money. Whenever someone worked hard, she rewarded them with silver. She had never realized that the people she cared about might want something far more valuable, her time, her patience, and her heart. She took a slow breath. Ayana, she said quietly, I cannot change the mistakes I've made in my life. I spent too many years believing success was enough. Perhaps I forgot how to simply be with people. The little girl listened carefully. But I can promise this, Kayla continued. I will never ask your father to become someone else. I will never try to replace your mother. If you allow me into your lives, I will earn your trust one day at a time. Ayana studied her face for a long moment, searching for any sign that the words were only for show. She found none. The little girl smiled faintly. Then don't prove it with presents, she said. Prove it by coming to our little cabin. Eat what we eat. Help with our chores. Sit with us when life is ordinary. Kayla smiled through tears. I would like that very much. The crowd, expecting a dramatic acceptance or rejection, witnessed something far more meaningful. No engagement was announced that day. Instead, a wealthy orc woman accepted the most valuable condition anyone had ever placed before her, not a demand for gold or land, but a chance to prove that love was measured by everyday kindness rather than riches. As Tahoma looked at both of them, he realized that the journey toward becoming a family had only just begun. After the harvest festival, everyone in the valley expected Kayla Ironfang to return to her grand estate and forget about the strange condition placed on her by a little Apache girl. Many believed a wealthy orc woman who owned thousands of acres would never truly step into the simple life of a poor cabin. But Kayla surprised them all. The very next morning, she arrived at Tahoma's small home by the river, not with a carriage full of servants or expensive gifts, but carrying a basket of fresh vegetables, flour, and simple supplies. Ayana opened the cabin door and stared in surprise. You came, the little girl said. Kayla smiled. I said I would. Tahoma stepped outside and greeted her warmly. He noticed something different about her. The confident businesswoman who commanded entire ranches was gone. Standing before him was simply a woman willing to learn. I don't know much about living this way, Kayla admitted. But I want to. Tahoma nodded. Then start by knowing that nobody here is above anyone else. Kayla accepted his words. Her first lesson was cooking over an open fire. At her mansion, meals were prepared by skilled cooks, and she had never needed to prepare food herself. She carefully followed Ayana's instructions, but within minutes, smoke filled the air, and the bread she tried to bake turned into a hard, black piece of coal. Ayana covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Did I make it wrong? Kayla asked seriously. The little girl finally burst into laughter. You made a rock. Even Tahoma couldn't stop himself from smiling. For the first time in many years, Kayla laughed freely. She wasn't laughing at a business deal or a joke from a wealthy guest. She was laughing because she had made a mistake surrounded by people who didn't judge her. Over the following weeks, Kayla continued visiting the cabin. She learned how to gather firewood, repair fences, wash clothes by the river, and recognize different plants in the forest. Each task seemed small compared to managing her empire, but she discovered that these simple moments carried a happiness money had never given her. Ayana slowly began opening her heart. At first, she still called her Lady Kayla. But one evening, while they sat beside the fire making small wooden figures, the girl quietly asked, "Do you think my father smiles more when you're here?" Kayla looked at her in surprise. "I hope so," she answered. Ayana nodded. "I think he does." That small sentence meant more to Kayla than any treasure she had ever owned. Tahoma also began seeing the woman beneath Kayla's reputation. He realized she was not the cold, arrogant person many believed her to be. She was someone who had built walls around herself because she was afraid of losing anyone else. One evening, while repairing a fence together, Tahoma asked, "Why did you really ask me to marry you?" Kayla was quiet for a moment. "Because when I saw you save that man," she finally said, "I saw something I had spent years searching for. Strength without cruelty. Power without pride. You had nothing compared to me, but somehow you possessed everything I lacked." Tahoma looked toward the cabin, where Ayana was singing softly. "And now?" he asked. Kayla smiled. "Now I think I found a place where I don't have to be the richest woman in the valley. I can simply be Kayla." But while their bond grew stronger, not everyone was happy. Some wealthy orcs believed Kayla was lowering herself by choosing a poor Apache man. Others whispered that Tahoma only wanted her fortune. Soon, those rumors would test the family they were trying to build. As the seasons changed, the bond between Kayla, Tahoma, and Ayana grew stronger. The three of them had become the subject of countless conversations throughout the mountain frontier. Some people admired the unusual family forming between a wealthy orc woman and a humble Apache father. Others could not accept it. Among those who hated the idea was Garrick Stonevein, a powerful merchant who had long hoped to gain control of Kayla's ranches and mines. He had always believed that wealth should remain among the powerful families, and seeing Kayla choose a simple life with Tahoma angered him. One evening, while Tahoma was repairing a fence near the river, Garrick approached him. "You really believe she chose you because of love?" Garrick asked with a mocking smile. Tahoma continued working and ignored him. Garrick stepped closer. "Think about it. A woman like Kayla has everything. Why would she want a man with a small cabin and no fortune? Maybe she just wants a loyal husband who won't question her decisions." Tahoma finally looked at him. "Kayla has shown me more honesty than most people I have known." Garrick laughed. "Then you don't know her past." Those words stayed with Tahoma long after Garrick left. That night, Tahoma wondered if there were things Kayla had never shared. Not because he doubted her, but because he knew everyone carried hidden pain. The next day, Kayla arrived at the cabin and immediately noticed something was wrong. "You are quiet today," she said. Tahoma hesitated before asking, "Is there something about your past that I should know?" Kayla froze. For years, she had avoided talking about the deepest wound in her heart. She had allowed people to see her wealth, her confidence, and her success, but never the pain hidden beneath them. She sat beside the fire and looked into the flames. "Before I owned these lands," she began, "I had a family." Ayana quietly moved closer. Kayla swallowed hard. "I had a little daughter." The cabin became silent. "She was everything to me. She loved flowers, songs, and watching the sunrise over the mountains. I promised her that I would always protect her." Her voice trembled. But she became sick during a harsh winter. I spent every coin I had trying to find a cure. Healers came from distant lands, but nothing worked. Kayla looked down. I lost her. Ayana reached for Kayla's hand. After that, I believed if I became powerful enough, I would never feel helpless again. I built my businesses. I bought land. I collected wealth. Everyone called me successful. She gave a sad smile. But every night, I returned to an empty home. Tahoma finally understood. Kayla had not been chasing gold because she loved riches. She had been hiding from grief. I thought money could fill the space she left behind, Kayla whispered. But I was wrong. Ayana hugged her without hesitation. You don't have to be alone anymore. Those words broke the final wall around Kayla's heart. Tahoma placed a hand on her shoulder. You should have told us. I was afraid, Kayla admitted. I thought if you knew my pain, you would see me differently. Tahoma shook his head. We don't love you because you are wealthy. We care about you because of who you are. For the first time in years, Kayla allowed herself to cry without shame. Outside the cabin, the wind moved through the trees, carrying away the last pieces of the loneliness she had carried for so long. But while their family grew closer, Garrick was already planning his next move to tear them apart. The days after Kayla revealed her past changed everything. The bond between her and Tahoma became stronger, and Ayana no longer saw her as a wealthy visitor trying to enter their lives. She saw her as someone who had suffered, healed, and chosen to love again. But happiness did not come without challenges. Across the valley, Garrick Stonevane continued spreading rumors. He told anyone who would listen that Tahoma was only pretending to care about Kayla because of her fortune. Once they are married, Garrick said, he will take control of everything she owns. Many people ignored his words, but some began to doubt. Even a few workers at Kayla's ranch started whispering among themselves. Kayla heard the rumors but refused to fight them with anger. I cannot force people to believe my heart is honest, she told Tahoma. Only my actions can prove it. However, Garrick's plan became more dangerous when he secretly convinced several investors to withdraw from Kayla's businesses. He hoped that if her wealth disappeared, Tahoma would leave her, proving his cruel accusations were true. Within weeks, Kayla's once powerful empire began struggling. The silver mines slowed. Trade agreements were cancelled. Some of her richest contracts vanished overnight. Everyone expected Kayla to panic. Instead, she remained calm. She gathered her advisors and began selling unnecessary properties to protect the workers who depended on her. She reduced her own comforts before allowing anyone else to suffer. Tahoma watched her closely. You are losing things you spent your whole life building, he said one evening. Kayla looked toward the river where Ayana was collecting flowers. Perhaps I built too many things that could be taken away, she replied. The only thing I don't want to lose is what I have now. Tahoma understood what she meant. Meanwhile, Kayla made a decision that shocked everyone. She prepared legal documents that transferred a large portion of her remaining wealth into a trust for her workers and the local community. She also prepared papers protecting Tahoma and Ayana from ever being forced to stay with her because of money. If they ever chose to leave, they would leave with nothing but her blessing. Kayla signed the documents alone, believing nobody would ever know. But Tahoma discovered them while helping organize papers in her office. He read the words carefully. The documents proved that Kayla was willing to give away everything rather than let anyone question the reason she loved them. When Kayla returned home that evening, she found Tahoma waiting near the cabin. You saw the papers, she said quietly. He nodded. Why would you do this? Kayla looked confused. Because I need you to know that I want a family, not people trapped by my wealth. Tahoma stepped closer. You still don't understand something, Kayla. What? We never stayed because of your money. At that moment, Ayana came running from the cabin holding a small wooden carving she had made. Look, she said proudly. I made this for you. The carving was not expensive. It was rough and imperfect. But Kayla held it as if it were the greatest treasure in the world. Why did you make this? Kayla asked. Ayana smiled. Because you always say gold is valuable. But I think things made with love are worth more. Kayla's eyes filled with tears. She finally understood that the greatest wealth she had gained was not in her mines, her ranch, or her fortune. It was standing beside her. But when the family prepared to face their future together, Garrick made one final attempt to destroy everything they had built. The day of Kayla and Tahoma's wedding arrived beneath a sky painted with golden sunlight. The entire mountain valley seemed to hold its breath as people from different worlds gathered together. Orc families dressed in their finest clothing stood beside Apache elders, ranch workers, and villagers who had come to witness something they once believed impossible. A wealthy orc woman and a humble Apache father were choosing each other, not because of power, status, or fortune, but because they had found something much rarer. They had found a family. Months earlier, many people had doubted Kayla's intentions. They believed she would eventually grow tired of Tahoma's simple life. They believed Tahoma would eventually chase her wealth. They believed two people from such different backgrounds could never truly belong together. But those doubts disappeared when they saw how they lived. They saw Kayla waking before sunrise to help prepare breakfast. They saw Tahoma helping repair fences on Kayla's ranch. They saw Ayana running between them with laughter, no longer feeling like she had lost something, but feeling like she had gained someone. Even Garrick Stonevane's lies had failed. After his attempts to destroy Kayla's businesses were discovered, many people realized that the only person who had been seeking wealth was Garrick himself. Now, standing beneath the ancient pine trees, Kayla wore a simple dress instead of the expensive jewelry she usually displayed. She had chosen a celebration that reflected who she had become. Before the vows began, Kayla turned toward Ayana. The little girl stood quietly beside Tahoma, holding a small flower bracelet she had made herself. Kayla slowly walked toward her and knelt down. Ayana, she said softly, when I first asked your father to marry me, I thought I was asking for a husband. The crowd listened. But you taught me that marriage is not just about two people. It is about the family they create together. Kayla held her hands. I know I can never replace the mother you lost. I would never try. But if you allow me, I want to spend my life caring for you, protecting you, and loving you. Ayana's eyes filled with tears. Then Kayla asked the question she had been waiting months to ask. Do you truly accept me as part of your family? For a moment, the little girl said nothing. Then she smiled and wrapped her arms around Kayla. I already chose you a long time ago, Ayana whispered. Kayla held her tightly. When? She asked. Ayana smiled through tears. The day you came to our little cabin without bringing gold. The day you sat with us, laughed with us, and tried to burn bread because you wanted to learn our life. Everyone around them laughed softly. Ayana continued. I knew then that you didn't want to buy a family. You wanted to love one. Those words touched every person watching. Tahoma placed his hand over theirs, completing the bond between them. The wedding continued with music, dancing, and stories shared between two cultures that had once stood apart. But the greatest moment was not the vows or the celebration. It was the understanding that true wealth was never measured by land, silver, or power. Kayla Ironfang had spent years building an empire, believing riches would protect her from loneliness. But in the end, the greatest treasure she discovered was a small cabin beside a river, a loving Apache man, and a daughter who taught her that the heart's wealth was worth more than all the gold in the world.